Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. Uh, we're still in hurricane recovery mode in the mountains of North Carolina, but we're hanging in there. 2 weeks after the storm, there's still about 2,000 people without power in my little area, and they're just now getting down to the back roads. And I mean, huge crews working 15 hours a day. So if that gives you any idea of the magnitude of this storm and the damage it did. And amazingly, it's sort of a mixed blessing. There are a lot of bees and hornets and, wasps and yellow jackets that nest under the ground. And when the floodwaters came in, they all came out and started swarming and stinging people. So it was really, pretty bad there for the first few days until the waters kind of receded. We've had a freeze already this week, and next week we're looking at going down to like 27. So the stinging insects are back in their hives under the ground. So that is something to be very thankful for, because they were making things really hard for people. And we just have a lot of wild bees and such in the mountains, and all kinds of hornets, and it's just. If you're ever walking around up here in the fall and you start seeing all these little holes in the ground and you're like, what the heck is that? That's where a bear went and dug up a beehive or a yellow jacket nest. They just dig them out of the ground and eat them whole. And you'll be amazed sometimes. You've been walking through these pastures or down a trail, and you see where a bear's been digging. You realize you've been walking through hornets' nests and bees' nests, and like for months, and didn't even know it, and just amazed that you weren't just like swarmed and stung. But we kind of coexist up here for the most part, and it's good to have them. There are pollinators. Certainly don't want to get rid of them. But yeah, usually things are not terrible. You can wander. I've been stung many times, just like stepping on a nest without knowing it. But with that flood, man, they came out like crazy. Like crazy. And I've heard about this down like in Florida and South Georgia too. I've never seen this, never witnessed it. But apparently when fire ants are flooded out, the entire colony of ants will form like a ball that floats in the water and will attach to the first solid thing it finds. So if it happens to hit your leg, you will suddenly be swarmed with stinging fire ants, and you will die from the venom. Maybe urban legend, I have no idea. But definitely be careful if you're ever in a flood area. I know down in the eastern part of North Carolina, one of the things we always had to look out for after hurricanes was water moccasins. And they're a form of rattlesnake, essentially a cottonmouth rattlesnake that lives in the water, swims very quickly through the water, and they tend to go in nests like that, like just a tangled knot of snakes when they're disturbed and there's like a flood, and they can be very deadly. But of course also alligators. We always had the alligators to worry about, and I hear they're dealing with that in Florida right now, and so say prayers for Florida, because Gators are, I've been around them a lot in my life. They do not bother me whatsoever. I'm down in the swamps in North Carolina, South Carolina, my ancestral homeland, really. I mean, my family's been down there for like 400 years. My dad's side came from the mountains, my mother's side came from the coast, and my mother's side was there for a lot longer. Um, we had gators, and they don't bother me. Like I said, my uncle had one as a pet. I actually like alligators. I mean, they're not personable or anything. I mean, when I say a pet, I mean it was more like a novelty. It stayed in a little pool and ate chickens and such. But anyway, the when I'm out fishing and or frog gigging or even duck hunting and such in the swamps, gators don't bother me. There'll be one just, you see its eyes pop up and it looks at you and it just watches you pass. It doesn't want to bother you and it does not want you to bother it. I have no problem with alligator hunting. Really, that I really do enjoy gator meat almost as much as I enjoy frog legs or snapping turtle. It's very similar. So I really, do have no problem at all with alligators, but I don't want one popping up in my backyard and me not knowing about it, or getting in my pool, or coming through the front door like you're seeing some of these people. So, remember to say prayers for everybody that's still being affected by the hurricane, because like I said, there's still 2,000 people up here, give or take, with no power, and it's going down 27 degrees on Tuesday night, and you know hopefully they have a fireplace or a wood stove and some dry firewood, because no one's getting kerosene right now. The roads have been closed for basically 2 weeks. They're doing their best just to keep gasoline at the gas stations, but kerosene is what a lot of people rely on up here, and natural gas. And a lot of people's natural gas tanks just floated away in the storm. Seriously, they just popped off and gone. So do say some prayers for people, because a lot of people are going to have a really hard, cold week. And 27 degrees, no big deal on the mountain. We'll go down to minus 20 in the winter. But when everything's soaking wet and you're tired and you're hungry and stressed out, it's not going to be fun. It's going to be really bad for people. So do remember that, and really don't believe what you're seeing on television, because it's not an accurate representation, at least not in the national news, and for the most part not in the local news. They're really trying to put a good face on everything, and it's not. But we are recovering, and things will be okay in the long run. And we're just all grateful to be alive and have what we got. So, and we all certainly really appreciate everybody from other places in the country and really throughout the world. I got a nice email from a lady in England just 2 days ago, asking me how could she help. And I really don't know right now because when FEMA took charge, everything really changed. It really changed the way people were bringing up donations from outside. Apparently, I'm not supposed to speak about that. I was actually kind of banned from posting in a forum because I mentioned FEMA last week, and I didn't think they were doing a very good job. So I'm just going to tell you, I don't think they're doing a very good job, but they definitely have frustrated outside help, in my opinion. Judging on what other people have told me, people whom I trust, I could be wrong, but from what I've actually seen on TV, I do believe it. And what I've heard on local radio, I definitely believe it. But apparently, I'll have to leave it at that. But anyway, she also told me that I have been pronouncing St. Hildegard's name wrong. She said it's not Bingen, it's Bingen. Like I said, I've never claimed to speak German. I had a horrible time trying to pronounce Father Nape's name. Grew up with a ton of Germans. But, actually there are a lot of Germans in the mountains of North Carolina. A lot of them came up to work the ski slopes and run restaurants and motels and such in the 70s. And before then, really, from World War II on, a lot of them escaped and came here. And a lot of Italians and, I grew up with a lot of Jewish folks. Actually fairly ethnically diverse area, really, because of so many people that came here to work in the restaurants and the ski slopes and that whole alpine industry as it was really through the 80s. It's kind of changed now. like I said, I've told you before, we had like the biggest sauerkraut growing and processing and canning industry in all of America, just down the road from me. And they all switched to Christmas trees. But I have never heard it pronounced Bingen. And if that is the way it's pronounced, I'm going to have a real hard time with that. So I guess I'm going to say, until I get used to it, St. Hildegard von Bingen, or as I've been instructed, it's properly pronounced von Bingem. But that's no one I've ever heard say her name actually pronounces it that way. Like all the Catholics and writers on her Catholic books, all the herbalists, everybody here in the U.S. and anybody I've ever heard says Bingen. But hey, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. So I'm going to give you that pronunciation, and until I get used to it, I'll probably give you both. But anyway, let's get on with today's show. And we've got some really interesting plants. Actually, the medicinal herb of the day is really one of my favorites, and it's Tansy. Tansy's a little controversial these days. People kind of caution against using it. We're going to get into that. It's, speaking of German, Abbot Walfrid Straube wrote about Tansy. The first Christian era herbal book was written by Abbot Walfrid Straube, who was tutor to Charlemagne's grandchildren and one of the most influential figures in the Catholic Church at the time, was a great herbalist and a very foundational figure in herbalism. So when we get to Tansy, I'll get to tell you a little bit about what he wrote about it. But as usual, we will start with our foraged foods, and this one's really one of my favorites as well. And this is from, of course, the Spring Foraging Cookbook. We've been working through that one all year, right? I think I released it in January, so here it is October, and we're still talking spring plants. So if you don't, if you ever wonder, is there a great deal of value in my books? Yeah, I don't really write short books, and while I wish I could offer them to you at a lower price, really Amazon sets the price. I don't really have a choice about it, and most of what you pay for one of my books goes to printing costs and shipping. I only make a few bucks off each book. That's cool, I do wish I could offer them at a lower price, and that's why I always say you can order an ebook, a PDF, directly from me for about $10. So, and I could, I wish, honestly, I wish we could just get my books in libraries so people could actually get them for free. And I have no idea how to do that. I have talked with librarians. I have talked with various people, and they say, well, there's like this library organization, and they choose which books to buy. Or maybe your local library will buy one copy of your book to put it in their library as, celebrating our local authors. But there's like some prohibition because I'm the author. If I actually start contacting libraries, they kind of put you on a blacklist. You're just not allowed to solicit them to buy your books. But so y'all, I mean, if you're listening to this, and one of the best things you can do for me, and if you think my books will be valuable to your community, is you as a local library patron can request my book. Now, if we had one person in every county and every state in America who would do that, everybody would have access to my books. But all I can do is ask you to request my books from a local library. Now, if you happen to know someone who's in that like National Library Association or whatever it is, I don't know if there's one for each state or if it's one for the entire country, they have like this exclusive list, and they only work with certain publishers. It's really sort of I don't think it's very fair, but if you happen to know someone or be one of those people, please add my books to your list, because I want as many people as possible to have them. I think it's useful information. You'll find out why in a minute. If it's like the first show you've ever listened to and you don't know anything about me, well, I'm about to tell you things about kudzu that you've never heard before. I mean, kudzu is really one of my favorite plants, right? And then we'll get into tansy. And so wherever you live in the United States, you're going to find either kudzu or tansy. I mean, they grow in such different climates, but together in the same climates, they just have different tolerances. I think it would really be good to get my books into a lot of people's hands, whether I make a dime on it or not. I mean, last year during Lent, I'm not going to say how many books. I gave away a lot of books for free, ebooks, and I was just really glad to do it. And, a lot of those people who got my books have become subscribers to my Substack newsletter, and we continue to communicate, and it's really good. And I'll probably do that again this year. But, I mean, suffice to say, I know for a fact, I give away more content for free than I make through paid content. So I'm not selfless. I'm not saying I don't need to make a living. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I'm saying that I really want this information out there. And, one of the best things you can do if you enjoy my podcast or my newsletter, Substack newsletter, judsoncarroll.com, where I send out free articles every week and all kinds of free content. It's a free newsletter. It's optional. If you want to pay for it, you can, kick in $8 a month to help support me. That's great. That's, really appreciated. That puts food on the table and allows me to keep writing these books. But, even if you don't have any contact with a library, share my newsletter with friends, share my podcast with friends. I mean, double, triple my audience, get the reach further out there. This stuff can really come in handy. A lot of the herbal medicine I talk about, or the wild foods, could save a person's life. I mean, without a doubt. So, it doesn't take a second just to send an email to somebody or post on your social media, hey, this is a really good podcast, please give it a listen. Or just got this article from Judson Carroll, or he just wrote this great book and it just came out and I think it's fantastic and I think you ought to have a copy of it. You ought to read it yourself. So I'm asking that. I probably ought to remember to say this in every show, but y'all know me. I wing it. I go through and nothing I do is like planned out ahead of time. Except just like the plants I'm going to talk about. They're kind of in order that I go through my books and pick them. But, I just get on here and improvise and just wing every show. I don't have a script. Nothing's planned. So if you can, I would say help your fellow man by helping them get access to the information I'm providing. But, help me if you like what I'm doing. I mean, there's no shame in saying I could definitely use some help in the promotions department. Everything I do is essentially word of mouth. And so, it's pretty amazing. I don't have a publicist. I can't afford a publicist. I don't have anybody promoting my work except the people who listen to my podcast or read my books and think it's worthwhile promoting it. And frankly, they've done a bang-up job to this point. I mean, it's I'm amazed how many people actually do read my work. I just, in the context of the population of the United States or the world population, it's still such a small fraction. I mean, if we could just get millions of people understanding that they can treat themselves and their families for, minor issues with the herbs they probably have in their own kitchen cabinet right now, the amount of lives that could save. Seriously. Or what the medicinal value of trees that are all around us, or the food that we just take for granted that's right under our feet. And now let's talk about one of those great food plants that is literally despised, and it's really one of my favorites. A couple years ago, let's see, I was visiting my mother, and she needed some new tires. So took it down to a tire place and had to sit there for a while, Well, anyway, a cop comes in and turned out to be a really great guy. We got along great. He's really into like survivalism. He does a lot of the primitive camping and survival schools type stuff. And he was really fascinated, with my knowledge of herbal medicine and foraging and such as that. And he said, if there's one plant that you would consider essential in our region, what would it be? And I said, I was probably going to really surprise you. I said, but I just pointed like right over there across the parking lot. There was this huge stand of kudzu just covering everything. I said, kudzu. And his partner's like, what? That stuff is horrible. And he turns around and said, no. He's like, the dude's right. Kudzu, the leaves are edible. They contain protein. The root contains starch. The root is medicinal. The lines can actually be used as fiber to make fishing lines or even refined into like linen. Kudzu is amazing. The flowers can be made into jellies and wines. I mean, kudzu is amazing, truly, and so undervalued. It's really known as the vine that ate the South. And that's true. I mean, if you have been in Georgia, Alabama, you've been like around Rockingham, North Carolina, you've seen kudzu that's just like essentially consumed entire towns. I mean, it just covers everything, kills, I mean, just smothers everything in sight. It's not native to America. It's considered a weed, of course. Now, interestingly, it was originally brought to America as an ornamental. Two growers really got into it. The most important one to me is Channing Cope. Channing Cope, I talked about him before. He was a real character. He wrote for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He was a big Southern man like my grandfather that, like maybe I'll be one day. Big, heavy-set, muscular guy, quick with a joke, quick with his fists, maybe drank a little too much. A real, character that everybody liked. And he was the gardening expert. And he realized that at that point, this is the early 1900s, the South was being washed away. We had over-farmed the land, and every time it rained, all our topsoil was just going right downstream. And, there was sort of like the Dust Bowl that was happening in the Midwest. What was really happening in the South as well, it's just people don't really talk about what happened to the South. Cotton farming, tobacco farming, all that. The land was just tapped out. People were not doing proper crop rotation. I mean, they were trying by the early 1900s, but chemical fertilizers were coming in, and they were just further exhausting the soil. Channing Cope realized that kudzu is leguminous. That means it takes nitrogen from the air and fixes it in the soil. That means it's a natural fertilizer. It prevents soil erosion. It holds the soil in place, so when it rains, all your topsoil doesn't wash away. And it is one of the very best feeds, a hay, green or dried, for animals, for livestock. Cows love kudzu, and they prosper on it. Goats do better on kudzu than probably anything else. Chickens love kudzu. The leaves contain protein. It is a full meal for an herbivore. So, I mean, chickens are omnivores, they eat bugs and such too. You could literally keep chickens and in the best health whatsoever just by growing a little kudzu in their run. Same with goats, etc. Cows love it. And he thought kudzu was the vine that could save the South. Essentially, it comes from Asia. It was, it's not native. He had no idea it was going to spread like it did. But in his system, it wouldn't. See, he wrote a book called The Front Porch Farmer, in which he used kudzu together with cattle and chickens. So he was growing kudzu as fodder for the animals. That system works perfectly well. Every year, kudzu will grow a yard a day. I mean, it just is incredible, right? It can grow up 10 feet a day. I mean, seriously, if it's hot and wet, if the conditions are right. But when you've got a goat or a cow or a flock of chickens, etc., whatever, there to eat it, humans can eat it as well. It's really good for us. But there to eat it, you keep it down so it doesn't take over. Well, he wrote this wonderful book called The Front Porch Farmer, which was one of the first true permaculture books, and literally made him world famous. And unfortunately, the federal government got a hold of a copy. Somebody in there did. And if I remember correctly, it was the Army Corps of Engineers thought, hey, we should plant kudzu along every roadway and stream bank to prevent erosion without the aspect of the animals eating the kudzu to keep it under control. And yes, it became the vine that ate the South. It will grow over a house. It will grow up telephone poles and tear them down. It will grow over every tree and smother it out. Kudzu becomes the dominant life form. I mean, it's great for deer habitat, but and many wild animals will eat it. But unless you're growing it and letting your animals graze on it, then in the fall cutting it for hay, you cannot keep kudzu under control. And again, you could be eating it yourself, but it needs to be constantly harvested to keep it under control. And nobody did that, and it just took over. I mean, the root of a kudzu is as big as a man. They can be 300 pounds. You cannot kill this vine back. Well, now they use Roundup. It's one of the reasons Roundup was invented, was to keep kudzu under control. That's like the only way. Unfortunately, if you're not using it the way Channing Cope intended, but it wasn't his fault. And the awful thing about it is Channing Cope got blamed for it. It was the government's fault, and he literally sat there and told them, "You can't do this. You cannot plant it on every roadside and creek bed. It's going to just run rampant and become the worst weed." They would not listen to him because, of course, the government knows best, right? And so soon it was growing up power poles and tearing down power lines. And in, 2 days, it could, I mean, literally, you can grow 10 feet a day. So say you went to the beach for a week and you came back, your house was covered in kudzu. I mean, it's like almost something like out of a horror movie, right? But it wasn't his fault. And that's what's really important to understand, because he got the blame for it. And he went from being one of the most popular men in American agriculture, and this big, gregarious Southern man, like, you can imagine, just big, larger than life character, who maybe had a drink too much every now and then, to being universally despised. His wife left him, his kids wouldn't talk to him, he died an alcoholic. And for decades later, people would actually drive to where he was buried to urinate on his grave. That's how much this, I think, truly great man became a villain. And I think it's just horrible. It was not his fault. So, with all that understood, I am not going to encourage you to grow kudzu. Now, if you wanted to grow some in a pot, like I said, the root gets huge, so that pot's not going to last you very long, and kept it strictly under control. Understanding it is leguminous, it means it's in the bean and pea family. It forms little seed pods. Now, birds will spread those seed pods. Other animals will spread those seeds. A little caveat, it doesn't reproduce very well by seed. It actually reproduces where the vine touches the ground, it starts to root. So really, you can control the plant to some extent. If you have livestock, you could plant kudzu, and if you managed it properly, never have to buy hay or animal feed again. But what happens if you let it get out of control? You let it get out of control, it's going to destroy your farm. If you don't have kids, if you're a one-generation farmer and you're thinking, I only really want food on my table for myself, hey, I'm going to let you make that decision. I don't think that's an irresponsible way to look at it. You're saying whatever comes behind me, it's their problem to deal with. Okay, that is a little irresponsible. That's actually a lot irresponsible. But kudzu is such a beneficial plant, I'm not going to hold it against you. Kudzu is a wonderful plant when used properly, and maybe the next generation would learn to use it properly. But more than likely, unless you've got a goat herd and some chickens that are really going to, I mean, goats are what we use naturally to keep it under control and even eradicate it, because they'll eat it down to the ground to the point that it starves the plant of sunlight. It can't keep, every time it sprouts, the goat eats it, and eventually it dies, right? So unless you have goats and chickens, probably not, because one day you're going to get the flu or something, or for some reason you're not going to have enough goats, you're going to have more kudzu than goats, and it's going to take over, and you're probably going to regret it. But if it's already established and growing, here's how we can use it edibly. Well, wait a minute. I will give you a few medicinal uses. The root is powerfully medicinal. Actually, it has one of the most interesting properties. It's much used in Asia to combat alcoholism. Kudzu root makes an alcoholic not desire alcohol. So right there would be a reason that this plant should not be hated at all. And it's a shame Channing Cope did not know that. Of course, I don't know that he wanted to stop drinking. He was pretty miserable and lonely and depressed, and would, obviously, understandably, so Say a prayer for Channing Cope. He deserved a much better legacy than he got. But anyway, it's also good for fevers, good to stop diarrhea, and increases blood flow to the heart. Amazingly enough, right? The vine itself can be processed and used to make fibers for cordage, like rope. That's real easy to do. What you do is you actually take the vines, you strip the leaves off of them. What they normally do is they put them in a bundle and bury them under the ground and let them ferment. Okay, then all the outer bark and everything sheds and the fibers start to come apart. In Asia, what they do is then stick them in a creek and let the water flow through them. They actually turn into a fine white fiber that could be used for cordage very quickly. You wouldn't even have to go through the whole fermentation process in a survival situation. But to make, everything from a nice rope, good strong rope there, it's very strong, to fine fishing lines for fly fishing, or actually the finest kimonos are woven from a kudzu fiber that is very much like linen. And really, it's just incredible. And left in its natural state, you can weave baskets out of kudzu like nothing else. Just another guy in Georgia, Matt Tomey. Look up Matt Tomey's work. He does kudzu baskets. That's his thing. He uses kudzu and tulip poplar. He works with bittersweet. He works with a lot of different plants. Makes beautiful baskets. He actually makes a great deal of money making artistic baskets. But, kudzu is not in any way, shape, or form a worthless plant or something to be eradicated. It is something to learn to use. And as food, we're going to look at it, what are the hardest things to find in plant food? Protein, starch, fats, sugars, actually, that we can use. For plant-based fats, we usually have to turn in nuts and seeds. For starches, there are only a few tuberous roots that are non-toxic and worth the trouble to process, and kudzu roots are freaking huge. Okay, you can get a year's worth of starch out of one kudzu root. Now it's a process. It's a lot of grinding up and soaking in water and straining through cheesecloth or really not even cheesecloth. You want a thicker cloth, like an old bed sheet or something. Okay, but if you were living off the land, this would be essential. Now, of course, we could harvest a couple small ones, and we could definitely make use of them just as a weekend forager. But either way you look at it, what you're going to do is chop the roots into pieces that are small enough to handle. And like I said, this thing could be 300 pounds, so it can be really big. Wash and scrub all the dirt off and peel them. Peel the outer bark off the roots. Slice and chop the roots into small pieces. You're going to want to use something pretty heavy for this, like a machete is what's traditional. And I love machetes. It's one of my favorite tools. So I've got a few that I like to use. A heavy cleaver would work. A hatchet would work. You probably want to saw it into chunks and then chop it. So this is a woody, tough root. So it's, you're going to want some heavy tools for this. But then you grate it up. And so you're going to want to get this into chunks you can use and actually use on a box grater and grate it up. And that's the hard part. That's the hard work. But once it's done, it's done. You could obviously pound it with hammers like mallets if you don't want to grate it. But a box grater works for small pieces. Actually, if you were just doing this for yourself in your own kitchen, I'd use an electric blender or a food processor. Why put yourself out if you don't have to? But traditionally, you're going to grate it up and then mix it with water, and this is called a slurry, right? You put the slurry in a vessel and that's covered with the cloth, and then just let the water drip through. And the starch will just settle at the bottom, and so take out everything off, pour off the liquid, collect all the dry stuff out, whatever. So it's not a fast process. It'll actually take several days, especially if you don't have an electric blender. But in a survival situation, this would be essential. It can be used any way. You might use cornstarch or potato starch or arrowroot. It's actually got enough calories you could live off of, or you can use it to thicken sauces and gravy. You could put it in with bread. In Asia, they actually make candies and puddings out of it. There are these wonderful little kudzu starch candies. And for me, I'm normally going to use it to like thicken a sauce or a gravy, but like pies, like you would use cornstarch in like a berry pie. Kudzu starch absolutely would work. And you think about it, if you're out in the woods and you didn't have much of anything, if you could get a few pieces of kudzu root and make a little starch, and you could get a handful of blueberries or blackberries or something, and you just had a tin cup you could put over the fire to cook them down, you could make a nice little like pie filling out of this. A nice little, just the insides of the pie. You wouldn't have the crust, but I mean, that's calories, that's nutrient dense. You could actually live off of that for weeks. Seriously. So, I mean, it's definitely something to look at. But even, far more practical, the leaves. The leaves are so much easier to harvest. Another issue in surviving with wild foods is scarcity of protein. I mean, if you don't have fish or animals, you have a very hard time getting protein, but kudzu leaves actually contain protein. They're in the legume family. They're in the bean family. To make it nutritionally accessible, you're going to want to combine, to get the most nutritional value out of that protein. You could get some just by eating it by itself. If you can put in a little animal or fish protein with that, even if you caught one little minnow or, frankly, in a survival situation, a bug, that would help you survive. If it was a cricket or a grub, not things I want to eat, but if you had to, we can. But I mean, looking at just as the wild kitchen, I mean, kudzu leaves cooked down to something like spinach. So you can put, spinach is good with so many meats and, so many seafood dishes. So, definitely think about combining them. Considering this will grow a yard a day on average in the summer, you could grow kudzu as a food crop for the greens for yourself. Very, very small space. You could actually produce a lot of food. A lot of food. And that's what Channing Cope was seeing. But he didn't even know it was edible for humans. He was just looking at it for cows and chickens and goats and such. So, but yeah, really quite good. When the kudzu leaves get older, they get tough and they have like a slightly furry texture. So I want to harvest the leaves tender, and they'll just keep coming all season from spring through fall. First frost will kill off your kudzu. It is not hardy. So from the last frost to the first frost, you could every day harvest a nice big bowl of kudzu leaves when they're tender, before they get tough. Cook them like any pot herb. Like I said, it's a lot like spinach. Not remarkable, not really strong. Definitely, you think something you could put in soup. You could cook it up and have it with some vinegar and bacon and pork chops, the kind of thing I'd do. I'm sure you can make a salad out of it. Eat them raw when they're tender. I have eaten them raw. It's not great, in my opinion. The texture's a little odd to me when they're raw. I would much rather cook them down and make a cream of spinach soup out of them using kudzu, cream of kudzu soup. I've given you a recipe before on how to make from scratch soups. Spanakopita, oh my gosh, I love spanakopita. In that case, all you would do, you'd make a cream of spinach essentially. You'd take a little butter and flour, make a roux, put in your spinach, your chicken broth, cook it down, a little grated nutmeg. I like a little garlic in there. That's up to you. And then just wrap it in some phyllo dough and bake it. I love spanakopita. That's one of my favorite things. I grew up with near a Greek family. They had a little restaurant, and I could live off of spanakopita, literally. I could live off of spanakopita. I was a vegetarian for some years in my teens, and it was not good for my health. I do not endorse a vegetarian diet, but yeah, I basically lived off of spanakopita. Spanakopita with feta. Put some feta cheese into that mixture, and that is just so good. And they made this white pie, which was, a cheese pizza with, oh man, yeah, I ate with them a lot. And those big Greek salads with the feta cheese and the Kalamata olives, and good times, good times. And I love the baklava too, but really spanakopita. Anyway, I'm so drooling right now. The place closed a few years ago, and I miss it like crazy. That was like my go-to. And they made an Italian-style eggplant parm. They did a Greek, what's the Greek version of eggplant parm? I'm blanking on it right now, but it's, the eggplant with the cream sauce and everything. But then they also did an Italian style eggplant parm that was like phenomenal. I mean, better than I've had in most Italian restaurants. But anyway. Now let's talk about the flowers. The real treat of kudzu, and not the survival, necessity. The survival necessity, of course, would be the leaves. That's the most useful part. But the treat is the flowers. They are purple flowers, and they smell like grapes. They don't just smell like any grape. They smell like Smucker's grape jam, like that purple grape jam. It's like the most incredible, I mean, like too grapey to be grape flavor. And you can use them essentially any way you use grapes, except for eating them out of hand raw. You can eat them. You can throw them in a salad. They're tasty. They don't taste like grapes that way. Cook down, boil them down, make jams, make jellies out of them, make wine out of them. Seriously, with a kudzu vine, you could make wine. You don't even have to have a grapevine, and it's going to taste like, what's that? Lambrusca? You remember Lambrusca? It was real popular in the 80s and 90s. It's a sweet purple grape Italian-style wine that's slightly carbonated. It's not a fancy wine. It's a table wine, and I've actually missed table wines. Now we have, I don't know. I'm not really happy with the state of wine in America now. We have a lot of good wine, we have a lot of bad wine, and very little in the middle. And growing up, my family had a little imported grocery store. We had fresh produce and a butcher in house. We had all these imported wines and cheese. And there were so many just table wines that you would have every day with a meal that were inexpensive and not overly tannic and not overly sweet. They just complemented the food. And you can think of those from so many cultures. I mean, your standard Chianti from Italy, your standard Rhine wine, Liebfraumilch milk from Germany, your just standard Bordeaux from France. I mean, gosh, I could go down that list. They're almost like impossible to find every day. These days. And I mean, just wow. I mean, I used to have a red Bordeaux and a white Bordeaux, and people didn't even know what grapes went into it. Now you go into a store, everything's Cabernet, everything's Pinot Noir, everything's this and that, or it tells you what country it comes from. And there's those like standard, blended, common, everyday drinking wines seem to have largely left the American market. And meanwhile, the prices have gone through the roof, which, I mean, it's just crazy. But you can make a very nice, if not sophisticated, wine from kudzu. And it could be just a nice everyday table wine, actually. And if you leave it a little fizzy, a little carbonated, it's going to taste very much like a Lambrusco, and it has this floral aroma. I mean, because it is a flower. So, I mean, it's actually very nice. It's very nice to cook with. Putting it together with pork is just like perfect. I mean, like a pork roast. Yeah, it's really actually very good. Pork or chicken, certainly goat. Goat has its own unique flavor. I've heard it described as sweet. I don't think of goat as sweet. Maybe a little nutty. Anyway, just I don't know. If you had it, you know. If you haven't had it, you don't know. But goat and deer are very much related. So if you think of like good venison, if it's not gamey, that's kind of what we're talking about. Definitely venison with some kudzu. Kudzu flower wine. Maybe a few juniper berries to kind of bring out that. Oh, yeah, that's gonna be fantastic. Some good black pepper, some onions. Oh, definitely. Some pecans, chestnuts, anything would. I'm like starting to put a recipe together in my head, and I could definitely go down that path. I could really get that going right now in a nice pot roast in the oven. So now let's get to Tansy, our medicinal herb of the week. And as I said, this is one that was used a lot in ancient medicine, and not much anymore because it has a certain level of toxicity. Traditionally, it was just one of the essentials. No herbalist would be without Tansy. It grows wild as a weed throughout most of America. It is Tanacetum vulgare. You can get seeds from catalogs and grow it as an ornamental. It may be called bitter buttons, common tansy, cow bitter, garden tansy, golden buttons, or tansy. And it's very pretty. It's very ornamental. And it's good for keeping a lot of bugs out of your garden because a lot of bugs don't like it. But starting with Walaford Strabo, Abbot Walaford Strabo, one of the most pivotal figures in herbalism and Christianity. He said of tansy in his beautiful book that was written all in poetry called Hortulus, not far away from whatever he was talking about before, I don't remember what it was, but not far away grows tansy, commonly called ambrosia. Famous it certainly is, but whether that is the same ambrosia so often mentioned in ancient writings, many would doubt. However, the doctors use it for the power it has. A draught of it clears away as much blood inside as the size of the dose you take of this nourishing brew. Well, that doesn't tell us a lot, but St. Hildegard, the greatest herbalist of all time, writing 700 years later, he would be around 300, she would be around 1080 or so when her books on herbalism were published. She recommended it used in small amounts, cooked in food for cough and congestion. She also recommended it for indigestion and food poisoning. She recommended tansy infused in wine for urinary stones. Any kind of kidney or bladder stones, really good. She used it for delayed menses. She recommended tansy as a sauna, steam, or smoke, or including the herb in a bath for delayed menses. She was not using it internally. However, if used at all, I'm going to say again, this herb must be used with great care because it does have some toxicity. Gerard, 1500 England. Actually, it was a popular edible in England, so don't be too afraid of it. He actually really enjoyed the fresh shoots of tansy, as he called it, the newly sprung up herb, cooked with eggs or cakes of tansy, which be pleasant in taste and are good for the stomach. For if any bad humours cleave thereunto, it doth perfectly concoct them and scour them downward. I should have said St. Hildegard von Bingen, right? Okay, so Bingen or Bingen. It's going to take me a while with that. But anyway, back to the Shakespearean English of Gerard. It scoureth them downwards. The root preserved with honey or in sugar is an especial thing against the gout. If every day for a certain space a reasonable quantity thereof be eaten fasting. The seed of tansy is a singular and approved medicine against worms, for in what sort soever it be taken, it killeth and driveth them forth. That's one of the reasons we have to be careful with it. It's a powerful vermifuge. It does have some toxin to it. Definitely should never be used by anyone pregnant, but it was a popular food in early England, but it was much used as a culinary herb in ancient Rome. It was one that features very much, along with rue, another one we have to be careful with, in Apicius's cookbook from ancient Rome. The same, pounded and mixed with olive, is good against the pain and the shrinking of the sinews. Also being drunk with wine, it is good against the pain in the bladder, and when a man cannot piss but by drops. And yes, always remember, that is proper English. It was not considered a vulgar word in Shakespeare's time. But it was good for strangury or, suppressed urination, which can be quite serious, actually. So very good to know. Culpeper, about 100 years later, said that the herb was undoubtedly under the government of Venus. What does that mean? Well, usually it means it's a woman's herb. That's all he really means by that, although he had a lot of astrological notions. He said it is an agreeable bitter, a carminative, which means settles the stomach, and a destroyer of worms, for which case a powder of the flowers should be given from 6 to 12 grains night and morning. Worms are often the cause of putrid fevers and epileptic fits, and sometimes bring on a consumption. The medicines usually administered against these are ineffectual, and many of them are mischievous. Hellebore has brought on convulsions. Well, yes, it would. You want to talk about a toxic herb? Don't eat hellebores. Don't be very, very careful with hellebore or false hellebore, which can also be quite toxic. And everyone knows the danger of mercurial, so mercury even, which obviously we don't use anymore, but was very popular at that time. Besides, it is from these deleterious compounds that half of the defective teeth in young people are owing. He thought, I guess, mercury was causing people to have bad teeth. It was probably more sugar. England was consuming a huge amount of sugar at the time. The flowers are the part to be used, and they should be given in powder, but there requires care in collecting of them to obtain all of their virtue. Clip off a quantity of tansy flowers before they are overblown, close to the stalk. This must be done in the middle of a dry day, and spread them on the bottom of a hair sieve, termed upside down. It's a fine sieve. They used to actually make them out of horsehair. That's why it's called a hair sieve. Now we mainly use colanders, which, yeah, I'm sure horsehair could be cleaned. It wasn't unsanitary, but that's not part of our modern kitchen now. Anyway, he talks about how to harvest them and how to use them and everything. Interestingly, he said the leaves are used and are counted restringent and vulnerary. That means wound healing. Good to stop all kinds of fluxes. That could be either diarrhea or bleeding. Let's see, to dissolve coagulated blood and to help those who are bruised by falls. Remember how, I guess it was, Abbot Strabo said it was good for coagulated blood. Yeah, it does seem to help with bruising, like St. John's wort does. And anyway, that's neither here nor there. Totally different plants. But could also be used as a cosmetic to take off freckles. The English of his time really hated freckles. Freckles were a sign that you had been in the sun, meaning you were of the working class. So they used a lot of herbs to get rid of freckles. Being of Irish descent myself, I quite like freckles. I think they're quite cute, but that's just me. It also, also good for sunburn and morphew, and as a restringent, he uses a lot of old words. Let's see if there's something. It helps the whites in women, which is leukorrhea, and commended to help children that are bursten and who have a rupture. Hopefully in our era we don't have children that are bursten or ruptured. That means hernias. So children had to work hard back then and were of a weaker constitution. I shudder to think how that might happen these days, but given all the human trafficking in our country, maybe it would be a good remedy to use. Unfortunately, I worked with a United Nations group, an NGO, back in the early 2000s on human trafficking, and saw some of those horrific things I've ever seen in my life, and can't think about it or talk about it to this day, actually. Being boiled in water and drunk, it eases the griping pains of the bowels and is good for sciatica and joint aches. The same boiled in vinegar with honey and alum and gargled in the mouth eases the pains of toothache, fastens loose teeth, and helps gums that are sore. It settles the palate of the mouth into place. That means like when the roof of your mouth swollen or kind of the back of the throat there, if it has fallen down, it cleanseth and healeth ulcers in the mouth or the secret parts, meaning the private parts, the genitals and such, and is good for inward wounds and closes up the tips of green wounds and heals old, moist, and corrupt running sores in the legs or elsewhere. Being bruised and applied to the soles of the feet and hands and wrists, it wonderfully cools hot fits of ague, so helped with fever, just being applied topically. And that's interesting. And also he really liked it, again, for sunburns, pimples, freckles. Dropped into the eyes takes away the heat and inflammation of them. Amazing, Tansy had so many uses. Getting into more modern use, we'll look for Miss Grieve in the 30s. She mentioned it had been documented in British medicine going back at least as far as 1577, but of course we can go a lot further than that. And it's one of the herbs dedicated to the Blessed Virgin Mary. It has a lot of religious significance, and it was used as one of the strewing herbs. People didn't used to bathe a lot, and there was a lot of stench. There was a lot of stench from the horses. There was a lot of stench from the livestock running around. Our ancestors lived in stinky times, and so on holy days and festivals, they'd take various flowers and herbs that had a good scent and strew them on the floors of the church or in your house or wherever people would step on them, and it would make things smell a lot better. So that's one that they used. And she mentions that Parkinson, probably England's greatest herbalist, grew tansy and as both an aromatic and culinary herb as well as medicinal. And she said it was related to a lot of old customs at Easter time. And the archbishops, this was apparently a custom in England, the archbishops and bishops would play handball with the men of their congregation, and the winner got a tansy cake. And that tansy cake tradition probably goes back at least as far as ancient Rome. So nobody really knows how far that one goes back, but it was also one of the bitter herbs eaten by the Jews at Passover. So not an herb to be afraid of. It's just an herb not to use in medicinal doses if it could be toxic. And like I said, it can also help keep bugs out of your garden. So I like to grow tansy. I think it's pleasant, whether I use it medicinally or not. It's one that I'm not going to give up on. It's what we would call a balsamic plant. It has a strong aroma that can help keep bugs out of your clothes or from eating your tomatoes and such. She gives several recipes using it. She talks about how it was used in Finland as a green dye. And then we'll get to medicinal actions. Anthelmintic means it helps get rid of parasites. Tonic, in this case I'm thinking she means for the stomach. Stimulant, and emmenagogue means it helps bring on menses. Also valuable in hysteria. That's actually an inflammation of the pleroma, the tissue around the lungs, not what you would think of hysteria, someone being woohoo, but good for kidney weakness. Being taken in a wine glass full dose. And excellent and safe emmenagogue. Modern herbalists would disagree, but it was considered a safe emmenagogue. I'm not afraid of tansy, but you'll have to look into it yourself. I do include in bitters formulas and such. Good as a diaphoretic nervine. It means helps with fever and calms the nerves. Used in moderate doses, stomatic and cordial, meaning good for the heart and chest pains and congestion. And anti-flatulent, and also helps allay spasms. But in large doses, it becomes a violent irritant and induces venous congestion of the abdominal organs. So she's definitely warning against large doses about it. She talks about a candy that was made from it in Scotland, which would be very nice. I may have to try that one at some point. The recipes are in my book. They're in her book too. You don't have to buy my book to get it. In fact, Maud Gree's Modern Herbal is available online for free in several forms. So, check them out. She's got some great recipes in there. Actually, she had a wonderful sage and apple sausage recipe that that's one of the best things I've ever found. Green apple and sage and pork made into a sausage with black pepper. I added, of course, some red pepper. I like my stuff hot. That's a fantastic sausage. One of the best recipes I've ever found, honestly. So in the Irish tradition, John Kehoe said it had a hot, dry nature. The seeds and flowers are an approved remedy against worms, bruised and mixed with fat, essentially. Applied to the region of the navel, it would kill worms in children. Rubbing a mixture of oil of roses into the juice of tansy onto the body will prevent a shivering fit. The juice drunk with wine provokes urine and opens all obstructions of the body. An ointment of it cures the scabby itch of the skin. And I think, once again, I can say John Kehoe is the least loquacious Irishman ever lived. Brother Aloysius was actually even a little bit shorter. He said, Tansy Tanacetum vulgare, used for irregular menstruation, hysteria, dizziness, cramps, colic, eczema, chapped hands, scurf, and rheumatism. Now, in this case, hysteria would probably not be that inflammation of the pleroma, but actually what we would now call PMS. It brings on menstruation, so it's going to hasten things along. In the Thompsonian system, actually Dr. Thompson stated, this hot, bitter herb grows commonly in highways and in cultivated gardens. A tea made of the herb is good for hysterics and other female complaints. So there we have that again. Yes, I know that term is offensive these days, but that was what they used to call it. And it came from that same condition of the inflamed pleroma. Makes one short of breath, so you're gasping for air and you're irritable. So when menstrual conditions came along that made one agitated, they would call it hysteria as well. So yes, I understand people take offense now, but it was not intended to be offensive. It will strengthen those that have weak veins, and kidneys is good for the stranglery or suppressed urination, or a stoppage of the urine, he goes on to say. It can be used for the relief of colds and menstrual flows when obstructed by colds. Pregnant women must not use it, absolutely. The green leaves pounded are good put on bruises and sprains to allay swelling. In the Materia Medica, the Thomsonians, they said officially it was used in decoction for weakness in the back, strangury, hysterics and female weakness, green leaves, good for application of sprains and swellings. American Eclectic Materia Medica said tansy is frequently employed in domestic practices in a minagogue, especially in cases where the suppression is a result of cold. Warm infusion taken freely upon going bed. The feet bathed in warm water. That's a good tip, actually. It increases the circulation. It's going to help. Resources of the Southern Forest talked about it more as a bitter for digestion, but also for its anthelmintic or parasite worm-killing properties. King's Medical Dispensatory of 1898 says it was indigenous to Europe, but had been brought to America and was now a common weed. Certainly true. It says oil of tansy is a poisonous agent. Very important. You do not want to use the essential oil of this plant. In fact, if you use it, as they say, it will kill you through a coma and asphyxiation. Yeah. So, I mean, if someone tells you to take internally the essential oil of tansy, you probably want to get a second opinion. Yeah, it will kill you. All right. But used in its natural form, tonic, emmenagogue, diaphoretic, cold infusion, a cold tea used for convalescence would help with dyspepsia. It would just good for the appetite and the cell of the stomach. We can kind of skip ahead here. They have a lot of old pharmacist information on it, the dosages and such and how it was used. The Lumbee Indians adopted it very quickly. Herbal remedies, the Lumbee Indians say that Lumbee healers suggested this tea to return strength to an individual who was feeling feeble. And the Cherokee used tansy as a pain reliever. The Cheyenne tribe used an infusion of the leaves to treat and blossoms to treat weakness and dizziness. Tismail Crow, who's Muskogee, said it was used for deworming people and dogs, and was considered a strong remedy for worms. So Native Americans picked up tansy very quickly, and there probably is a variety of tansy that is native to the Americas. There are a few different varieties of tansy, and so they would have recognized it. He also used it for gout and swollen ankles and feet, and for headaches he recommended the beaten plant be placed on the head. For styes and varicose veins, he recommended a compress of a tea made from the leaves and recommended it to repel insects, including flies and fleas. Tismail Crow's book's really good. Really one of the best Native American herbals I've found, and I think he's still around. You could actually get in touch with him and talk with him. He's really one of the, he's a cool guy, actually. So Jethro Kloss, writing in the 40s, I suppose 20s to 40s, said it was aromatic, tonic, emmenagogue, diaphoretic, vulnerary, it kills worms. Seeds were used as a vermifuge. I don't think he has any other remedies we don't know, but he does warn overdoses may be fatal. He also talks about using it for inflammations, bruises, freckles, sunburns, leukorrhea, sciatica, toothache, and inflamed eyes. Good in heart trouble. We talked about how it could be cardiac. Tansy should be taken in moderate doses only. And finally, we will end with a few modern entries here. Plants for Future says it is a commonly grown domestic remedy useful in treating a wide range of complaints, though it is little used in modern herbalism due to its toxicity. Obviously, its main value is as a vermifuge to expel intestinal worms and to a lesser degree to help stimulate menstrual bleeding. Tansy should be used with caution. It is possibly unsafe at all for internal use, and especially if you're pregnant. The essential oil of the leaves is toxic and can kill an adult. The leaves and flowering tops are anthelmintic, antispasmodic, used to treat menstrual irregularities, carminative, emmenagogue, stimulant, and tonic. Infusion of the leaves or whole plants used for menstrual irregularities again. Anthelmintic, especially for children, valuable in treating hysteria, kidney weakness, stomach problems, fevers, etc. Externally, poultice for some eruptive skin diseases, also used to kill lice, fleas, and scabies. So, again, a little toxic. The seeds used as an anthelmintic. But edible parts of the tansy include the young leaflets, raw or cooked, and can be used in small quantities in salads or cooked. Actually, as a flavoring, it can be used as a substitute for nutmeg or cinnamon. It actually has sort of a little spiciness to it. It's an interesting little plant. And it was, like I said, very popular in ancient Rome. It's a little like shiso or Japanese beefsteak in flavor, but also a little bitter and different. And I kind of like it, actually. I'm not, it's one I actually do use a little culinarily. Along with yarrow. Yarrow has an odd kind of spicy pepperiness to it. But anyway, we've already talked about how it can be poisonous in large doses, or especially the essential oil. I think we could really wrap it up there. Cloverleaf Farm has a long entry on it, but I think we've covered just about every single use of it. All right, so that pretty much wraps up tansy, which I think is a really interesting herb. Like I said, to me, tansy and rue are more, I probably use them more culinarily in small doses than I do medicinally, but they certainly have their place. And I'm not as freaked out about them as maybe some people are, but you're going to have to do your own research and make your own decisions. I'm not going to give you that advice. So y'all have a great week, and I will talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.